Did you get the camera? So this one, I'm
All right, Karen. We're at time. So when I see the screen go on, we're back, taped and live.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, well, I think this is part 2 of the July 28, 2022 Webster Town Board Workshop. Part 1 from 4:30 to 5:50, where the 6 department heads presented their proposed 2023 budgets. And part 2 has 2 items tonight. One is the tabled item from last week's board meeting pertaining to the Ready Project MO65. Glasses, they're right there. And then the second item is a presentation by Ahmed Mustafa on a proposed ambulance district in Webster. Now, Charlie took away my joke, people heard it. I said, I love how many people are in attendance tonight. Did you all come for the tabled item last week, the MO65 item? Yeah, okay. So, yeah, well, that's why I didn't make it as a committee. A lot of robust conversation last week here at the board meeting. Good questions, Councilman Cahill, you kind of led the good questions. And it led to tabling these 2 resolutions that were basically to award contracts on MO65 to the low bidders and also to authorize the town supervisor to sign those contracts. Over the last week, I'd like to think there has been some information that was asked for from last week that has been provided to the town board. So I think we're ready to move forward with these. The one caveat I would have is that I know, Paul, you've given some great insights on options of the funding of this. I think the board is in agreement with the option that you gave for the rationale you gave. We don't have to do that. I'd rather have that be a separate. Go ahead.
No, we don't have to do it soon.
Okay.
Just get the contract approved, and we'll do it in a week or 2.
Yes, because I like the wording of that. We have the wording of accepting the contract and the authorization, which, Patty, I'll be looking to you to read these. But I just want to make sure, Dolly's not here tonight, you know, I want to make sure that we make the funding resolutions are tight on this. Is that okay with everybody?
Yes.
Have at it.
Well, and I also want to say, because the public has not been part of our robust conversations through the week, that one of Councilman Cahill's biggest concerns was that perhaps these contracts could continue to rise since there wasn't an escalation clause or a non-escalation clause
Right.
in them. And I think we've got a good answer on that, and the force majeure that you had talked about really, in essence, does protect us from that, so.
Yeah, I'm very satisfied with the response that I got, and I'm further comfortable with the knowledge that if there is going to be increases, that it has to be approved
Absolutely.
ahead of time,
Right.
which is the way a lot of contracts work. You submit an RFC, then it has to be approved by the owner, and then go forward. So I appreciate all the work that was done, researched, and provided to the board. I'm a lot more comfortable now than I was at our last meeting.
Good, well, I'm glad you brought those issues up, and
Yeah.
we're all informed at this point. So, the first resolution, I move that we award the Ready Project MO65 Lake Road Pump Station Improvement Contract, number 1A, General Construction, to CP Ward in the amount of $498,500,
Second.
and to authorize the town supervisor to execute said contract.
You ready?
Second.
Bill,
Let's see. Councilwoman Cataldi.
aye.
Councilman Ebb.
Aye.
Supervisor Flaherty.
Aye.
Councilman Cahill.
Aye.
Councilwoman Wynn.
Aye. And I further move to award the Ready Project MO65 Lake Road Pump Station Improvements Contract number 1B, Electrical Construction, to Hewitt Young Electrical LLC for an amount not to exceed $121,650, and to authorize the town supervisor to execute said contract.
Second.
Councilwoman Cataldi.
Aye.
Councilman Cahill.
Aye.
Councilman Abbott.
Aye.
Supervisor Flaherty.
Aye.
Councilwoman Wynn.
Aye.
All righty. Well, Charlie, I don't think Dolly's at risk of losing her job, but nicely done. Ahmed, are you behind the pillar?
I'm here, I'm here.
Oh, you're, okay. Well, one thing we know is, Ahmed, you know how to pack them in. You ready to go?
All right. Can you hear me okay? Not used to sitting here. Very important. Well, thank you, Supervisor Flaherty and town board members and guests and members of the community for allowing us to present tonight on the considerations for establishing an emergency medical services tax district in the town of Webster. Why are we here tonight? As we'll show you in a minute, there's an increasing demand for EMS services in the town. Coupled with that, there's a significant decline in the available labor force. We need people to run the ambulances. There's a significant wage disparity between EMS and other first responder and healthcare segments. And the reimbursement does not cover the cost of services or readiness. And I'll explain readiness a little bit further on. This graph is fairly self-explanatory. As you can see, that since 2017 in the foundation of REMS, our call volume in the town of Webster has increased quite significantly. In 2021, the total calls were 6,535 approximately, and we project going into 2022, it will be 7,291. That is a lot of calls for an agency to take on a yearly basis, and we don't see that number slowing down at any time soon. Here's one of our biggest challenges, and this data was provided by the New York State Bureau of EMS on Monday, so this is as fresh as you can get. The graphs are, again, very self-explanatory. On the left-hand side, you see the available EMTs and paramedics in New York State as a whole. The blue bar are the EMTs, the orange or the top section are the paramedics. In New York, from 2017 to 2022 year to date, we have lost more than almost 2,000 paramedics and almost 20,000 EMTs. 20,000 EMTs, that is an incredible number. But what's relevant is what's happening in Monroe County. In Monroe County, in 2017, we had 662 paramedics and 4,100 EMTs. As of Monday, we are down to 373 paramedics and 2,299 EMTs. So just think about that for a second. There are 14 EMS agencies staffing on average 20 ambulances a day. You know everybody doesn't work every day. You know there are paramedics and EMTs that don't work very often. In fact, probably half of those take calls on a regular basis. So that means about 190 paramedics and 1,100 EMTs staff all the ambulances in the county of Monroe. That is a small number, right? And the number is declining steadily. Why is that? Well, simple math. I guess economics is the word one would use. If you look at this chart, it is a pay scale showing what the average hourly rate is after 3 years of employment in certain fields. In EMT, based on what we can afford to pay them, not because we're stingy, what we can afford to pay them given our budgets, in the county is making an average of $17 an hour. Starbucks, Wendy's, and Burger King are offering about $19 an hour to start. A patient care tech in a hospital who doesn't have to deal with situations in homes and all the other challenges is making $20. A paramedic, on average, $25. A police officer, based on some contract data, $30. Firefighters, $30. New York State Police, $40. Nurses, $41. And physician's assistants, almost $46. This is why recruiting and retaining people in this industry has become very, very hard. And it's a difficult job to do, and the economics just aren't very attractive. So why does the current revenue model present the challenges that they do, and why can't we control them? First of all, our income is unpredictable and inadequate. So Medicare and Medicaid, which are the insurances that are provided by the state and federal government for people that are either over a certain age or below a certain income, those reimbursements have not changed significantly in decades. So that means that when we go to pick up somebody that doesn't have a tremendous amount of income or that is over a certain age, the cost of going to that call is barely, sometimes not covered by the reimbursement by the federal and state government. Private insurers, which most of us have if you're not on Medicare or Medicaid, they reimburse the patient. So what that means is we sometimes don't get paid, and we certainly don't get paid in a timely manner. We recently got a check from someone that had a bill open for us from 2017. Now, I could not pay my crews from that call. I could not pay my mortgage or rent or utilities from that call. We have to keep things going. And so by having private insurers reimburse the patients, we don't know when we're going to get paid. That makes it very, very hard to run a railroad and manage a budget. As discussing the Medicare and Medicaid reimbursements, no matter how much we charge, it can be $1 million a call. They're only going to pay the $300 and some they pay because that is set by the federal government. The rest is a loss. We don't get to recoup that. We don't get the balance bill for that. And while Medicare, Medicaid, or private insurance might cover a call, what happens on days when we don't have calls or the call volume is low? The staff still would like to get paid. The bank would still like their mortgage. The town would like to get paid for their fuel, but there's no revenue associated with just sitting around. That is what we call the cost of readiness. When you have other first response industries, you're paying them a fee at the beginning of the year. They know what their income is. They can plan their budget and their staffing accordingly for the most part. In our case, we're relying on transport. If we don't take someone to a hospital, we get almost no payment, in many cases, no payment at all. But we still provided a service, we still had labor, and we still had other costs associated with it. Speaking of those costs, there are almost no volunteers left in EMS. Let's just be very clear. It's a hard job. Almost every agency is paying. To ask someone to come out and do all the training that's required and volunteer is becoming harder and harder. And those that do have varying schedules, and if something else comes up, they aren't obligated to work, they don't come. And that's why we've chosen not to rely on volunteers if there were any to do. The labor rate has increased at a rate I cannot even conceive. We were talking to some of our team the other day as we were building this presentation. Our labor rate in some segments has increased almost 50% in 5 years. I can tell you our reimbursement rate has not. In the last 5 years, or sorry, in the last 18 months during COVID, our labor rate has gone up almost 15%. That is untenable, and we cannot continue to sustain that with the reimbursement models that we have today. And why do we care about this? Because the EMS employees that are standing in the back of this room and that are out on the road today and that have covered this community for the last 50 years, we deserve the same benefits. We deserve paid vacation. We deserve to only work 40 hours a week. We deserve holiday pay and 401ks with match, as other employers and other first response agencies do. Today, that is virtually impossible to do. Medical equipment and supply costs are increasing at double digits, in some cases triple digits. We had an email from one of our neighboring EMS agencies today asking to borrow medicines because they can't get it. How do you run an ambulance without the medications you need to manage a cardiac arrhythmia? That is the problem we are facing today. And what we wind up doing is we wind up going on the web, and we wind up going to what we call scalpers, and paying whatever they will charge us so we can get equipment to make sure, or supplies to make sure our equipment runs on the road. And as the demand for EMS increases, you need more ambulances. The challenge is every call is not a transport. On average in Webster, half the calls we get, we transport. So you have to be ready to take, let's say, 100 calls. You only get compensated at some ratio for 50 calls. That gap is what we call the cost of readiness. And we need help covering that cost because it generates us no revenue today, but it does generate a corresponding expense. This is a busy slide, and I know that I've been coached to be careful about wordy slides. But I want you to understand what that ambulance does when it comes to your house. It is not an Uber. It is not just a ride to the hospital. Those were days 50 years ago when a hearse showed up. There was no dead body in it, so we put a half-dead body in it and we took it to the hospital. Those days are gone. We are bringing you the emergency room, and that costs money. When that paramedic or EMT gets here, we do an assessment. We start IVs. We monitor your heart rate. We do a physical assessment. We do a psychological assessment. We look at your heart. We look at your nervous system. We look at your bones and your muscles. We take care of pregnant mothers and the babies when they tend to arrive unexpectedly in our ambulance. And with all of that, we have to do interventions. We provide medications, which are just going up in cost when we can get them. We start IVs. We defibrillate, we cardiovert. We can pace your heart externally until we get you to a cardiologist who can implant one. We manage your fractures, and probably above all else, we can make the pain go away for a little while until we can get some definitive care. In addition to all the things we do in the back of the hospital, Webster EMS has done, and NEQ has done a lot of things in this community. When COVID came, we held COVID screenings. We did vaccinations for homebound residents. One of a very few of the EMS agencies in the county do either one of those things. We do CPR, AED, and first aid training, many times for free, to community groups and not-for-profits. We do community outreach and patient follow-up. And what does that mean? And I won't say in every case, but in many cases, when there's a cardiac arrest, a significant pediatric injury or trauma, we call and we follow up the day after and 7 days after. We make sure the families have needed support. We make sure they get counseling. We make sure they have an ear to listen to if they need it. We have patients in this town that we go to every other day for the same thing over and over and over again. They're burdening the system, and it is not good for them. Forget us, it's what we're here for. It is not fair to them. So we reach out to their primary care physicians with permission. We reach out to social services. We spend an incredible amount of time doing things to help these patients help themselves because they're in the gap. And all they're doing is, calling an ambulance because there's no one else to come help them do some of those basic things like getting up off the floor because they slipped out of bed day in and day out. We have a community loan closet. They may not mean anything, but when you need a pair of crutches for a few days, it's cheaper than buying them. When you need a wheelchair for a visiting guest, we lend those. We work with our fire and police colleagues in the community to talk about EMS activities and what's going on. We're there to help when there are large-scale events, when they need us. We're there to talk with the police chief about what we would do in, absolutely disastrous situations that may take place. And we support large-scale events, tournaments, and concerts in town. This is what a community-based ambulance will do that a commercial ambulance from outside probably would not. So let's talk about call volume. This chart shows the call volumes for 2021 for some of our communities that are comparable in size to us. We are the bar green on the right, estimating 6535 calls for 2021, and showing as a reference the fire departments, about 2,000 calls based on their state published data. We could not put the PD information up because they calculate their calls in a much, much different way. So why is this relevant? I want you to show how our organizations are financially supported by the community. In Monroe County, $106 million goes to the county fire department, excluding the city of Rochester. That's another $51 million. To do the quick math, $157 million goes to the fire department. That is fantastic. They give incredible service. They've got paid staff, good firehouses, good compensation for their employees. About $75 million in the county goes to law enforcement. Again, Monroe County Sheriffs, several community police departments. We love having them. No one will stand up more for our local police department than I will. They know what looks right, they know the people, they know our routines, and they know when things are off. having a community-based police department is fantastic. $3.7 million go to all the EMS agencies in Monroe County. $3.7 million. That is less than what we collect in taxes for our fire departments in the town of Webster in aggregate. That is 14 EMS agencies get a total of $3.7 million. Does that seem inequitable or disparate to anybody? I find it incredible. I had to put the data labels on our bar graphs at the bottom because you couldn't see some of the bars that were so close to the x-axis. So why does this matter? It matters because a community ambulance is essential to the citizens of Webster. Having some way to fill that cost of readiness and the gap in our income will ensure the long-term viability of a Webster-based ambulance service. It will enable us to recruit staff that are needed to ensure timely response to over 95% of our calls. The response times will remain at or below regional standards as they have for the years that I've been in this organization. Webster-based EMS will be prepared to support the increasing patient demand. The residents will still be billed for transports, but will get co-pay assistance, reducing some of the financial burden of calling an ambulance. And these patients that are calling over and over again for the little non-transports that have to get a bill today because someone has to pay for us, will get that for free. And that does make a difference to a lot of our elderly patients. So what does it cost? Right? We're not asking for a tremendous amount of money. This is a scale based on a requested value of 25 cents per thousand of the assessed value of a house. So if you have a $200,000 house, which is probably close to the median today in town, you're asking for $50 a year or $4 a month. $4 a month. That is a cup of coffee, a little less than a gallon of gas, and something that I think people might consider a good investment. If you're fortunate enough to have $1 million house, which maybe some of the EMTs and paramedics do today, I don't know, it's a total of $250 a year, $21 a month. $21 a month to ensure you have a community-based ambulance in the town of Webster. That seems like a very, very good investment to me. What would it do, and why isn't it more? We're not asking you to cover our whole operating budget. We will still rely on third-party billing and Medicare and Medicaid. All we're asking is to fill the gap, that cost of readiness, when we have to have people there to go to the calls that don't transport, when we go to the people that have fallen and don't need a bill, they just need 15 minutes of our time to get up, that today are getting a bill. Based on our estimates, this funding would cover about 30% or less of our annual operating budget. Again, in my opinion, a very small investment to ensure that a community-based ambulance stays in town. This is not an easy process, and we're starting late. Typical for Alma Mustafa and some of our projects, but we get them done. If we start the discussions today, which we have, and if the town is willing to move forward, there is still time to get a tax district established in the town of Webster, ready for January 1st. I know Paul would like some of these things to move forward if the town decides to do it, but we've got resources and we've got friends that did it last year in Gates that just established a tax district and are willing to help us get this done. So before I close, I just want to make a few comments. I would like to address the misleading information posted on social media by someone whom I expected to fully support what we were asking for tonight. For years, the former supervisor and town board worked with NEQ to establish Webster EMS. It took time, it took vision, and it took a significant investment to get us to a place where the town is one agency providing EMS for all its citizens. I am confused by the sudden change of attitude by the former supervisor towards NEQ and EMS in general, and I don't really care what is motivating him to cast doubt on something he was so integral in creating and what he could very be well one of the most significant contributions he made to the town during his tenure. However, no one, and I mean no one, can ever question my motivation or my integrity, as was done last week in a very public forum and continues to be done on social media. I've spent 32 years dedicating my life to the service of others, the last 20 in this town, as a volunteer firefighter and a paramedic. I know what my fellow first responders and I have done and do for this community every day, and I can assure you that no one's negativity will reduce our desire to help strangers in need or try to do what we feel is best for this community. Most of those who are disparaging what we are trying to do have never risked their health or lives for others. Very few, if any, have done CPR on a child in front of their parents or stood by family members as we bury a loved one who gave their lives to save the strangers. It is easy to criticize when you have no idea how to do the job. The issues we face regarding the gap between insurance reimbursements and the true cost of providing service are not unique to Webster, but are being encountered throughout the state and across the nation. EMS agencies are closing, never to return around the state, and volunteers are almost non-existent. The inequity in wages and recognition is eroding the available number of EMS professionals at alarming rates. This town board has an opportunity to do what has been needed in this town for more than a decade, to do what many other towns have already done to ensure a healthy, Webster-based EMS system that will exist for its citizens for years. EMS is vital to the health and safety of the community. Webster is a place where life is worth living in some part because when the sick and injured need help, NEQ and WEMS are ready to respond quickly and with highly trained EMTs and paramedics. Many Webster residents are alive today because of EMTs and paramedics at NEQ and WEMS. This week, we have received letters of support from many members of the community, which we have sent to the supervisor, and I am sure there are letters against. There are almost 1,000 surveys in my bag here from people who have used EMS in the last few years, with 96% of them indicating they support the town funding EMS as the community supports fire and police. I appreciate the timing of this request is aggressive, but it is not impossible. If the creation of the tax district for 2023 is not something the town feels they're able to pursue, given the timing or for other reasons, then we are going to need some other form of assistance in 2023 until a more permanent financial solution can be established. The status quo will not do today. Please, help the men and women of NAQLS, the EMTs and paramedics who are rendering aid to strangers 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, continue to serve those in their time of need. Thank you, Supervisor Flaherty, for allowing me to present this evening, and I'll take any questions.
Okay, well, Ahmed, very nicely done, and I will say, this is great how many people are here. If you don't mind, as a show of hands, who's ever attended a town board workshop before? Hey, that's not too bad. Just so everybody knows, not a public hearing. Workshops are when outside agencies, outside companies, town department heads will present things like Ahmed just did. And after they present them, the baton is handed over to the town board for questions and comments to Ahmed, whoever presented, and or any lieutenants, if you want to call it, of theirs that they think might be subject matter experts. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that. So with that being said, Jenny, do you have any comments or questions for Ahmed?
How much do WEMS, need from the town each year? Do you expect?
I'm not
How
sure.
much, do you just, okay, so this is how much you expect, 2,961?
No, that is our goal. That is our goal.
Okay,
So, yeah.
okay.
And it's not expect, we request.
Oh, okay. That's all. Thank you.
I just want to thank you for the presentation and, for the men and women out there that work with WEMS and ECALs. First of all, I want to thank you for your dedication to this community. I totally agree that a community-based ambulance is essential for this community. And I thank you very much for all that you do. And for those that are married to or significant others, for those that work correctly, thank you for your commitment also. This presentation was very well put together, and it's pretty alarming. You look at the graph of the pay scales where EMTs are making $17 an hour to start, and I know there's certain large big box stores out there that are starting some other people at $20 an hour. And I've said this in meetings before, there is no way I could ever do what you do. I just don't have it in me. I don't. And I really don't think that people have an appreciation for what you go through because they haven't walked a mile in your shoes. They just haven't. And the dedication that it takes and the training is phenomenal. It takes a great deal of training to do what you do and to be proficient at what you do. And it's just a learning. One question I have for you that Matt, I'll ask you to explain it, because there's a large percentage of your calls that the EMTs are there, the paramedics, but there's also the fire department and there's a police department, correct?
Yes.
And what percentage of those calls would you say that is?
Well, it's changed post-COVID, but I would say 70, 80%.
Right.
You still get support in one of those, if not both.
Exactly. And the police department is funded 100% by the taxpayers, right? And so are the fire departments. And EMS is providing what I would consider equally important service on their calls. But very little of their money comes from the community. There are some communities out there that are most certainly assisting their local EMS. And to the point that we have received a great number of letters of support, we've received letters that aren't so supportive. And to Tom's point, Supervisor Flaherty's point, that this is a workshop, so public input and questions are not allowed in a workshop. And given the information that we've been provided today, I would like to hear from our community, because this is a community-based ambulance. So I would ask this board's consideration to have a public forum, whether it be a public hearing, whatever it may be, to allow to hear directly from our residents. Because if we do implement a tax district, that will impact them. So why would we not want to hear directly from them before we make a decision as to, yes, we do want to have a special district for ambulance, or whether we don't? I think that's the direction I would like to go. And personally, I would like to support our community-based ambulance wholeheartedly.
Well, I'm pretty sure to answer your question, Councilman Cahill, and Ahmed, you can correct me, I'm not familiar with this particular type of district, but normally these types of districts would require a public hearing anyway.
Yeah, so we would have to.
So there would be a public hearing. It would be part and parcel,
Exactly.
if the town board goes forward with it, there would be a public hearing.
So would you just briefly explain why it is that the fire departments are their own taxing entity, but EMS isn't? Because I don't think a vast majority of the general public really understand why that is.
So, in New York State, EMS does not exist in the law. We are not an essential service, we are not a recognized service.
Right.
So, police officers and police agencies typically fall under municipal governments. In most cases, not every case, there are some privates, but in most cases. Fire districts, like school districts, are their own municipalities, they're their own governing bodies. So they have their own budgets, they have their own elections, they have their own governance, things like that. Because EMS does not exist in the universe, in law in New York State, we're not an essential service. We basically operate under certificates of need that are then allocated to us for operation, either through a town government or a fire district in the community.
Okay.
It's
So
a loophole.
just right. So it's a state issue, and it's just astounding to me as a resident that EMS across the state is considered not to be an essential service. That's just absolutely amazing. All right. Police, essential. Fire districts, they're essential. You have 70 to 80% of the calls that you attend, the fire department's there, the police department's there. But you're considered not as essential. And with the rates of inflation that we're seeing, and I'll use this MO that we authorized for the supervisor to sign today. And we talked about it at the last board meeting. the jump in price of this contract was, I've never seen anything like it. And it's because of a number of reasons, but inflation is driving that cost. So the costs that you're talking about in your presentation, they're real. They're absolutely real, and we just saw it, right? We just saw that, and it's not going to slow down anytime soon, for at least the next 2 years. I think we all know in this room, these prices are going to continue to go through the roof. Inflation is not going down, it's going up. And the last thing I would want to see is for us to lose our community-based ambulance. It would be a travesty, in my opinion. That's all I have. Thank you so much for everybody being here. Thank you for your presentation.
Ahmed, I have a question. I know that you are in a position, and I can't think of a better person to be in that position, to be advocating for the state to recognize EMS and paramedics, EMTs and paramedics as essential. And I know that you met with one of our state representatives today. Can you tell me where you are in that process of getting that recognition?
Deputy Supervisor Cataldi, it is painful. My answer is embarrassing. I am the only person that's been appointed to that task force of 12. No other seats have been filled, and that task force has not made one step forward since my appointment earlier this year.
When was that task force?
It was designated in December, and the seat was filled in March, I think, March or April. And there's been no other 11 vacant seats that have not been filled.
And did the representative you met with today have anything to offer?
No knowledge of the task force. It's a Republican.
Well,
It's a Senate.
a medical emergency is not a Republican or a Democratic issue.
It's a question for them.
Yes. You know, and I mean, we're facing yet again another agency. We just saw this with the special police, if you will, where the state does not recognize them. And there are loopholes in the law which just leave those agencies hanging out to dry, if you will. And I certainly value a community-based emergency medical service. But I also have a fiscal responsibility to our town taxpayers. And that concerns me. You know, it concerns me when we have to look at breaking the tax cap. It's something that we've been burdened with for several years. So that when we're in the middle of budget presentations, we see the cost of everything going up. And this is one more. So I do have that concern. I share with Councilman Cahill that yes, we want to hear from the public. I know that in the next few weeks, without even announcing a public hearing, if we were to move forward on that, we will be hearing from the public. The fact that this has been promoted and discussed as much as it has through social media and other aspects, I know that we'll be hearing from the public. So I do want to hear from more people.
We got 1,000 surveys from every one of you.
Those are great. Those are for the service that was offered.
The people that use it, right?
Yes, the people that use it. And there are 1,000 in there, and we have approximately 46,000 people in town. So many have not used it, and they may feel a little different than that. But with that said, that does not mean that I don't value the service that you all offer to this town. As a retired healthcare professional, I understand. I know what you do every day. And we need you.
And that helps us a lot.
I understand.
Right? We are stretching the rubber band as tight as you can go.
No, I understand that, but I also think that we need to have some sort of partnership with the almighty governing agency who does not recognize you as essential.
Keep working on it.
I think as far as Albany, recognizing EMS as an essential service, I think that's years down the road. And, I don't think that EMS not only locally, but generally, has the years to wait for Albany to do the right thing. I don't envision that happening, ever. You know, and I look at your projections here, and that's based on, what, 25 cents per thousand. And I can only speak for myself. I can't speak for any other board member. I can't speak for the, you know, the residents of the town. I would be more than willing to pay for a community-based ambulance, more than willing to pay. But then again, that's me. And I think it's very important that we afford the rest of the residents of this community a forum to come in and voice their concerns, okay? What are their feelings with respect to a community-based ambulance, given the projected cost? This is not to say that's written in stone, because ultimately it would be the town board's decision to set the rate. But conceptually, I think we as a board have the responsibility to create a forum soon to hear from the community. We're hearing negative, we're hearing a lot of positive. We have a decision to make. And I don't want to be a member of a board that saw our community-based ambulance go away because we didn't want to afford our residents an opportunity to come in and talk, and then we make a decision on whether we go forward with an ambulance district or not.
Bill?
No comment at this time.
Charlie?
No, obviously, there'll be a little legal work to do.
I'm not asking for a decision. I'm asking for allow the public to come in and let's hear from the public, because that's who we work for. We work for the residents of this town, and they should have an opportunity to come in and be heard before we make a decision as to whether, yes, we will go ahead with an ambulance district in 2023, or no, we will not. That's what we were hired to do, in my opinion, and that's what I would like to see happen.
Ahmed,
Sir.
what did I promise you about tonight? Go ahead, let it rip. What did I promise you?
I can't.
You don't remember? What was I gonna say?
Oh, nothing.
Nothing,
Nothing.
nothing, right? Now, not to put you on the spot, why did I promise you I would say nothing?
Not sure.
Well, if this is me reneging on that, I'm gonna make this quick, I hope. One of my first board meetings in 2020, Charlie Genesi, our town attorney, and Ahmed came back from Albany, and there was much rejoicing. We got all of our appeals done, and we had a certificate of need for the town. Is that correct, Charlie?
That's correct. January 15th.
January 15th, I was 15 days in. Boy, did I know a lot about being a supervisor. In April of 2021 through October of 2021, Councilman Cahill, if you haven't figured it out yet, he is the town board liaison to ambulance, and I gotta tell you, he does a great job. You department head around here, or a department that needs a liaison, that guy advocates on your behalf, if you didn't figure it out tonight. But John and I had a lot of meetings with Webster Fire, because they were discerning getting out of the ambulance business. It's kind of highly, if you've been following these meetings, you know what happened. But to me, one thing that always stuck out to me about those meetings was West Webster really wanted to find out if the town was gonna use their certificate of need and trump their decision. Where, Johnny, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I was always like, you know, why don't we take a look at this in a different way? We have an opportunity here to maybe set up something, think outside the box, to set up ambulance in Webster for the next 20 years. Is that essentially what I said? Didn't work out that way, did it?
I think we both knew from first meeting it wasn't going to.
So in November, we did decide as a board, and I overspoke that night, so I'm not going to do it again tonight, to basically take the town's certificate of need, and I'll call it award, Nequals, WEMS, to be number 1 in the 911 queue for all 35 square miles of Webster, and not split Webster into 2 districts where Penfield Volunteer Ambulance was going to handle west of Hart Road and Nequals WEMS would handle east. There's a new building on Jackson Road, very nice, by the way. In July of 2022, actually about 3 weeks ago, Nequals WEMS received a $205,000 grant from the town. So that's the timeline. Oh, I forgot one thing, and this was key, is that if you go back to the tape, I think it was a November 16th meeting, I said, Ahmed, we are going to move into 2022, and I want to put my money where my mouth is, so to speak, as a supervisor. I want to assist you in 2 things. 1, starting the research of an ambulance district. And 2, working with the state representatives to see if we could take this non-essential and take what I think was unintended over the years of ambulance employees in the industry falling through the cracks. I said it. You can go look up the tape. The reason why I told Ahmed I wasn't going to say anything tonight is because Ahmed and John, we've been in lots of meetings about this, I have been bluntly honest about this to them. My impression of starting the research on an ambulance district, in my mind, was that we would start the research, and I had an idea of how many people we were going to talk to and interview and try to figure out all the pros and cons of ambulance districts from Monroe County, from outside the county, from all over the place, to find out what was the best idea for the town of Webster. And in my mind, I thought that was going to minimally take until January of 2024, if we started that work in early 2022. Ahmed shows up about a month and a half ago and shows me this and says, let's do it by January 23. And I said, and I've said it then and I stick by it now. I think that's too fast. I think there's legislative or research issues and things like that. Now you said, child, I did it last year. Okay. And maybe I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth. I am impatient and I like to move things along, and government has frustrated me in 2.5 years on that. But this is one where I just feel as though an emotional decision is being made if we jam this thing forward in 5 months. And I don't like emotional decisions. And I have not changed my thought on this since we sat down, John and Ahmed, a month ago. I think it's too fast. I don't want to be disingenuous. I do want to be there for the research and lead the research if it can be. But I think it's too fast.
At the end of the day, and you know, you have your position, I adamantly disagree with your position, but I respect your position, okay? And that's, I've said it before and I'll say it again. We're on a board, we don't always have to agree on everything.
No.
Okay, we really don't, and quite frankly, I'm glad that we don't, because it does lead to robust conversations, as we have had numerous times on this board. We could wait 6 months, we could wait 2 years, but at the end of the day, we need to make a decision. And I'm not gonna make a decision until I hear from the residents of this town. So we can hear from the residents of this town as soon as possible, okay? So we know the direction that they want us to go, right? If you think it's too soon for 2023, again, I disagree. Let's hear from the residents before we even start going down that road and wasting a year, 6 months of research, and then have a public hearing, and the majority of the residents are like, you know what, we don't want a community-based ambulance. We'll wait a half an hour for an ambulance from the city to show up. I think, again, we should hear from our residents before we make a decision on which way to go, whether it's 23 or 24. I want to hear from the people that hired me sooner than later.
I'm gonna let Councilman Kay have the last word, Charlie. Anybody else? Well, that concludes tonight's workshop. Thank you very much.
Forgot the gavel. Forgot the gavel.
People need to have our salary and then go have. Take my salary. I'll take a
How you doing there, friend? I gotta figure out where that is behind that. Is that colder? Is that raw? Get out! Come on! Very nice. This is first of all, your leg is so you heard me on, I basically raised my powder so I would talk to